sign up for email notifications for our city website events for calendar at www.midlothiantech.us. Our next item of business is our agency budget presentations and funding request. Okay. Cassie Street.
Mayor and council members, thank you so much. This is our budgetary report of what Region Council has done over the past over this fiscal year.
Excuse me, would you give us your name and
I'm so
where
sorry.
you're from? And
I apologize. I'm Kathy Street. I'm with Reach Council out here in Midlothian. Okay, so Reach, we've been in Midlothian since 1988. We provide drug abuse prevention education in the schools, in the community. We provide underage drinking prevention education and community work, tobacco prevention, anti-bullying, and suicide prevention. All right. We were started in Midlothian as a result when Officer Rayfield died during his undercover work at the commission of that. We have been in Midlothian for 25 years now, and the city council has been the longest contributor to our programs. We provide our school and community presentations to the school district to understand costs. A little bit of statistics. We served almost 5,000 Midlothian students alone this last fiscal year, and 870 adults. Those are through both our work in the community, in the schools, our curriculum, our Red Ribbon Week presentations, our community events, all of those things, our alternative activities and some different events that I'll walk through in just a moment. The other numbers listed below there include our county-wide statistics for the last 5 years. I would just say we can look at 2013 to 2014 fiscal years. We actually lost 2 staff members from 13 to 14 and still managed to serve almost the same number of adults across the county. Red Ribbon Week is one of our national initiatives that we promote and participate in every year. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but we serve for Red Ribbon Week almost every single school in Midlothian. So. Tobacco prevention initiatives. We have several different things going on. We have Kick Bus Day. This is another national initiative, another national event that happens every March. For the last 2 years, we have done, I'll show them to you here, we have done anti-tobacco advertisement contests in the middle schools. During that week, there are anti-tobacco messages that are, and facts and information that are distributed through announcements and different ways for middle school students, and they get a chance to participate and compete in this program by creating their own anti-tobacco advertisements, and the winners get prizes. One of our new initiatives this year is a youth initiative. It's called SWAT, Students Working Against Tobacco. There is a Texas Youth Leadership Initiative program that happens. There's the whole event and leadership scholarships and stuff that happen every summer in Texas down south. So we're starting up a youth coalition type group to hopefully participate in those events in the summer and participate in activities through the school year. These we run hopefully through the middle schools. We have our Prescription Drug Take Back Day. This is another national initiative, and we're doing a site here in Midlothian this year. It's actually coming up on the 27th. You all have handouts. As of today, our site will be at Tim Toby's State Farm office parking lot. This is the idea of this is to bring back old, unused, expired prescriptions to get them out of homes so that they can be out of the access of youth. Prescription pill abuse is catching up to marijuana and alcohol in terms of the #1 drug abused by youth. Oh. And then the last thing that we are adding, or that we are restating, is our Community Coalition, our Safe Home campaign. We previously had this where we would have parents under pledge to not social host, to not provide alcohol to underage youth. We are restarting that this year in hopes that we can get that going. Yeah. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Susie Cass-Stevens.
I relish each year the chance to show you some pictures from the library. I'm Susan Cass-Stevens, and of course you know we're the public and the high school library. And let me make sure I can work. At the library this year, we've had quite a bit of growth. So as you look at the pictures, I'll just tell you a few of the facts. I think most startling is this summer, in the month of June, we served almost 3,000 more people than we did during the month of June in 2013. So that's just a thumbnail picture, I think, of what has been happening at the library. We have several groups in the library, and they're pictured on some of these different slides. I love to focus on the children, and I always ask the parents' permission before I take their pictures, but I have quite a collection now. We're actually open more than the main branch of the Dallas Public and more than the main branch of the Fort Worth Public Library. And that is due to the fact that we open at 8 a.m. earlier than other public libraries, but we stay open into the evening hours until 8 o'clock now, Monday through Thursday, more than other high school libraries. So the numbers are a little higher on my slides than they are in your information packet because we have grown in item count and circulation since I prepared that back in June. We have some community events that we share with the other school libraries, a virtual book club, Blue Bonnet Book Club, some community reading events. Our book clubs host senior adults, teenagers, and we're just starting another Meadows Adult Book Club. Right now, on Monday and Wednesday, we have TED classes. On Tuesday, Thursday, ESL classes. I'm very excited this year in the high school to be able to open 2 satellite libraries, one in the humanities wing and one in the math wing, which is a makerspace. And that has helped with some of the concerns about security. And so I'm excited to spread our library services outside the library room walls. So you see, the early visitors to the library, the little guys, turn into the high school guys. And it's just a very advantageous and unique situation. I think we still benefit from being a public and a school library. I do want to bring to your attention very briefly that Risa Ashley has worked in the library almost 20 years now. Really everything I know about libraries I learned from her. She's a wonderful employee. I always get many compliments on her customer service. Sandy Martin is our other full-time employee, and she's been a policewoman for a decade, a school teacher, and worked almost 20 years in Cedar Hill in their Parks and Recreation Department. She has a master's degree. They're very valuable full-time employees. I want to thank you especially for the new computers. We have 14 new Windows 8 PC computers, which is an additional benefit because our district is a Mac and Apple district. So it's very nice for our students to be able to access a PC computer in the library. This is our website. I didn't bring brochures with me tonight, but it's easily accessed from the city website. And you can see it's a collection of the school summer assignments, as well as information about our public library, Facebook. We have a blog. We have a Twitter account. Right now we have 3 collections of ebooks, and this is very important because so many of the items in the library are going to a digital form. And I just want to explain briefly, we're a part of the Overdrive Media, which most public libraries are a part of as well. So our citizens have access to the ebooks and the audio books that most of the public libraries subscribe to. We have a growing collection of ebooks in our school library catalog. Heritage High School opened with 3,000 ebooks. And we have as many ebooks available to us, but they're through the Overdrive account. So we're also building up ebooks in the school library. shared databases, and that holding includes about 28,000 ebooks. So there's our catalog and our Overdrive link. I just feel very glad that as a public library, we have the mission that is the same as the district's to empower all for a lifetime. So thank you very much for your continued support.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. John Wyckoff.
I'm John Wyckoff, the Executive Director of the Gingerbread House. And between last year and this year, we produced a new video that, Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to show it. 7 minutes. And it really gives you a detailed picture of what we do at the Gingerbread House, and then give you a few stats after that. Is that okay?
The team consists of an investigator from the district attorney's office, a forensic interviewer skilled in communicating with victimized children, a counselor specializing in mental abuse, and an executive director who oversees the team and brings together the resources needed to keep their work progressing. These are the staff of the Ellis County Children's Advocacy Center, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to ending crimes against our children. To understand the scope of their work, consider the case of Haley, an elementary school student who lives near Retta. Haley has always been known as a bright and optimistic young girl who loves her family and friends dearly. Her teachers regarded her as a model student. Then suddenly, Haley changed. As if overnight, she became withdrawn. At times, she lashes out in hostility over small matters. Haley's mother assumed it was all just a phase of growing up, something that would pass soon. But Haley's teacher isn't convinced that such dramatic changes are normal. 6 weeks ago, she arranged for Haley to see the school counselor. At first, meetings with a school counselor appear unproductive, as Haley has been reluctant to talk. Then one day, Haley begins to speak about her stepfather and how much she wishes her mother had never married him. A moment later, she makes a disturbing revelation. It was last winter, when the holiday break at school had just begun. Her mother had taken Haley's brother to do some Christmas shopping, so she had left her at home with her stepfather. Haley had been upstairs in her room, while her stepfather was watching TV downstairs. After a while, she heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. For some reason, she grew frightened as he approached. Haley then recounts the graphic details of what happened to her that day. Upon this allegation of such a heinous crime, the counselor immediately notifies law enforcement. The local law enforcement investigator contacts the Ellis County Children's Advocacy Center to schedule a forensic interview with Haley. As soon as Haley arrives at the center, also known as the Gingerbread House, the forensic interviewer puts Haley at ease and begins the interviewing process. Members of a multidisciplinary team observe the interview via closed-circuit television. The forensic interviewer must arrive at the details that the team needs to evaluate the veracity of Haley's story. Therefore, she's careful not to ask leading questions. Her job is to remain neutral and allow the child to tell her story, to express her outcry. Furthermore, she attempts to mitigate the potentially adverse effects such an interview can have on traumatized victims who lack the coping skills to understand what they've experienced. The team in the next room will evaluate Haley's outcry. The group is usually composed of an agent for the Texas Department of Child Protective Services, a representative from the law enforcement agency with jurisdiction over the location of the alleged crime, destroyed by the criminal acts of a man who gained their trust and lived with them in their house. They will need help to begin to cope with what they've experienced. The center staff counselor will help guide them through their recovery. Prosecution of the case is led by the lead investigator of the case, who immediately sets out to gather statements, forensic evidence, medical reports, and any other information that will help build the case as it proceeds to the trial date. In the courtroom, Haley will face the judge, a jury of 12 men and women, prosecutor, a defense attorney, and the face of the alleged perpetrator. The testimony she gives is imperative for putting a criminal behind bars. The center staff will have acquainted Haley with the proceedings beforehand, being careful not to coach her testimony. For her, not only is the courtroom an intimidating environment, she'll also be forced to share with total strangers a litany of embarrassing details. What's more, she'll need to stand up against the scowls of the perpetrator and the brusque line of questioning of the defense attorney. It's an experience that no child should ever have to endure. Haley handles the stress well, and a verdict is ultimately reached. Guilty. The man who destroyed the life of an innocent child is immediately taken away. The family can now move on and continue the process of healing. Haley can return to being a child, growing up with normality. The team of the Ellis County Children's Advocacy Center can close the file of Haley's case, but their work will not end. At any given moment, the center's team handles a full range of abuse cases. And for every case similar to Haley's that the team is undertaking, there are many more that have not yet been brought to light. Frequent headlines in the local papers reveal the scope of the threat the center faces. Some victims of abuse are found in time, but others, the torture they have endured is not discovered until time runs out for the victims. With every day that passes, these victims suffer physical and emotional harm, but the Ellis County Children's Advocacy Center gets them in time to reach these victims before it's too late. The center needs your generous, tax-deductible gift. Help us be there when the next child cries out.
Yeah, there's no easy way to talk about the center, so we tried interviewing department heads, myself, and just doing interviews with the staff. And as I showed it to my two board members, Jesse DeLeon and my board president, David Tuttle, they said, John, I still won't tell the public what we do. So we actually had some volunteer actors come in, and we put the 7-minute video, and we said, the only way to really describe to you all, if you've never been to the center, is to reenact an actual case, and that's what we did. Hope it's not too severe. You're the very first group to see it. I have checked it out with one of your officers, Tim Scott, who's nice enough to volunteer to be in it. Plus, two of my board members, and I said, please don't, view it anywhere until City of Midlothian is seen. I'm giving you some updated statistics. When I first submitted our grant to you, our funding request, we were 204 interviews, and we have 2 interviews scheduled for Monday, which is September 1st. If those interviews would be scheduled Friday, we would have beat our record from 2012 of the 279 new cases for one fiscal year. We've been very, very busy this year. The counseling sessions, looks like the old pie graph, counting the no-shows, the cancellations and all that, we see over 1,000 counseling sessions per year. You're always curious about the number of cases. Midlothian PD last year had 22 cases, this year they had 21. The Sheriff's Office had 85, which 15 of those attended MISD. And this year they had 73 cases, but 26 of those children attended MISD. We know as you grow, there's going to be more cases because as Ellis County grows, we're going to have more cases too. We really appreciate the opportunity every year to submit a funding request to you. Hopefully this DVD will show you exactly what we do. These are the bad cases. You saw the headlines. If a child has been witness to a homicide or a child death, we still have to bring those kids in to interview to see if there's any red flags that law enforcement needs to investigate what happened to the child. Any questions I can answer for you?
Video did a pretty good job.
Again, we're trying not to be too severe, but to sugarcoat it, it's not going to get the point across to you all if you've never been to the center. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rawls. I don't think he's here. Is there anybody representing CASA? All right, thank you. Our next item of business is our administrative announcements related to personnel.
None this evening, Mayor.
We'll move to 2014-326 citizens to be heard, and I do have some, but on specific items, we don't have any others. Our next item of business is our consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda and considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion without separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately.
I'd like to remove item 331 from the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion to remove item 2014-331. Do I have a motion for the...
I move to approve the rest of it.
Okay, I have a motion for approval from Councilman Sibley. Second? Second by Councilman Rogers. Would you record your votes? It does pass 7-0. Okay, we'll move back to 2014-331. Consider and act upon a one-year contract with Ellis County Emergency Services District Number 2 ESD to provide fire and EMS response for ESD.
Thank you. When we were in the budget process, some questions came up about the ESD, and I just felt like before we had ratified this contract, I had a few more questions I wanted to address. As I did some numbers based upon what city manager Don Hayes gave me, it looks like each city resident pays in 2013-2014 $260.10 of the fire budget. In the same relationship, the county ESD2 residents will pay $66.33 as their portion of the budget. And so I just felt it prudent for council to review those numbers, and while ESD has its own authority to do what it needs to do, just make sure we're approving something while it has increased. The revenue contract has increased in 3 years, that residents have gone up, tax values have gone up, runs have not gone down, that we're approving the right number in this case. Chief, I appreciate your input on that.
What's the specific question?
Well, what is the methodology that goes into how that contract number is determined?
May I give you a little history? Okay. Our relationship with what is now ESD2 began in 1985 with Ellis County Rural Fire Prevention District Number 3. At the time, the Rural Fire Prevention District was limited by the state constitution to a maximum tax rate of 3 cents on the dollar. We formed the district in 1985 to be the unincorporated area of the Midlothian Independent School District, and excluded specifically the incorporated city limits of Midlothian and Ovilla, so that we were applying the tax solely to the people that lived outside the city limits in our school districts. The original board came together, and if memory serves me correct, they set the tax rate for the first year at 2 cents. I don't remember how many dollars it raised. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was given to the fire department directly. It didn't even go into the city general fund. And we contracted with them, and the Ovilla Fire Department contracted with them. The stipulation on the contract, the way they divided the money back then, was that they would pay each city $10,000 up front for just being willing to respond. And they would divide the remaining tax revenue that they received over the year between the two cities based on the proportional number of runs that we each made compared to the sum of each. average. In other words, the number of runs that Midlothian made in the fire district, the number of runs Ovilla made in the fire district were added together and then divided into our own number of runs to basically give us both the same dollar amount per run. And historically, from that point on, it ran somewhere in the vicinity of a 75-25 split, Midlothian being the 75 and Ovilla being the 25. About 2 years into that arrangement, in about 87 or 88, they raised their tax to the 3-cent ceiling because they wanted to give us as much as they possibly could. And it stayed at that 3-cent level all the way into the late 90s. In 96, the city council and city manager at that time wanted the fire prevention district to convert to an emergency services district so that we could then have a tax ceiling of 10 cents on that. The tax ceiling on emergency services district is not in the Constitution. It's set by the legislature. So it could be raised at some point in time above 10 cents, but it's been 10 cents for many, many years. We tried the election in 96 to get them to convert. Two things happened. One, the council wasn't willing to deny service if they didn't convert. And two, it got mixed up with some people that wanted to vote against annexation, and they convinced the majority of the people that they needed to vote no for the ESD because they were really voting against annexation. Kind of a weird situation, but it failed in 96. In 2000, the city council by that time had seen our cost for fire service and EMS service go up enough that they were willing to, in writing, tell the residents of the fire prevention district that if they didn't convert to an ESD, effective January of 2001, they were not going to have any service at all outside city limits. One of the gentlemen that carried that ball back then in terms of public hearings and promotion of a conversion is Mr. Manning, who is currently the Secretary-Treasurer of the ESD. He and Larry Marlowe did yeoman's effort back then in 2000 and convinced the people in the ESD to vote to convert. They told them when they converted that they were going to raise their tax rate from 3 cents to 5 cents immediately. They voted to convert. They got 5 cents immediately. It raised quite a bit more money, of course, than what we'd had. As the years have progressed since then, since 2000, they have gradually raised their tax rate up to 9.5 cents, which is where it sits today. I'm not sure, I can't remember if you were on the council in 2009, but we had the opportunity in 2009 to accept a SAFER grant from the federal government to hire 6 additional firefighters. In 2009, we were trying to finish our staffing for Station 3. And the city really, at that point in time, didn't have the money to pay the first year or two of that SAFER grant, the city's portion of it. The ESD stepped up to the plate and voluntarily said, we will pay the city's dollar amount for your grant for the first 2 years. We'll cover you for the first 2 years, and we'll do the best we can for the next year. That's what caused the amounts to go up rather substantially in 09 and 10. And it's been, I guess the last 2 years we've been at 780, and they're asking to continue that again this year at $780,000 of revenue. That's not the only revenue that comes to us as a result of the ESD, because we run the ambulance service in the ESD, and we bill for those services insurance companies of patients. It winds up where we get, I don't know, probably Tom Manning can tell me fairly closely, but I'm guessing somewhere around $130,000 to $140,000 a year from the runs that we do in the ESD. So you could add the 134 to the 780, and then just this last year, the ESD, even though they didn't increase the contracted monies to us, they gave us 3 CPR devices, Lucas CPR devices, to the tune of $45,000, and we put all 3 of those on our frontline ambulances. They've already resulted in saving several people's lives. So You know, when you add all those three things together, you come up pretty close to $960,000 of effective revenue to the citizens of Midlothian. That's a chunk of change. And the main thing I would say about it all is I've watched over these 29 years the boards of first the Fire Prevention District and now the Emergency Services District have consistently been as supportive as they possibly could be to our city. And they've really helped out in a couple of tight situations for us. So, you know, that's an awful lot of goodwill and an awful lot of support that has allowed us to have the fire department that we have today. We would not be where we are today without the ESD's contribution. And quite frankly, they have done it basically with almost no reserve funds. Just within the last 2 years, they've decided that the prudent thing to do would be to try to build a little bit of a reserve fund up in case they have some kind of catastrophic event that takes out some of their tax base. And so they have, to date, I think, set aside $22,000 in their reserve fund, and they want to add to it this year to the tune of about another $20,000 or $25,000, which is, right now they have like 8 days of reserve, you know, a very small percentage of their budget. And you know, even the money that they don't contribute directly to us, the money that is contributed to Ovilla, indirectly gives us the benefit of a fourth manned engine on structure fires, because they respond to all structure fires within the city as well as in the ESD with that manned engine. And they also use that manned engine to respond to EMS calls where we send one ambulance and they send their engine in the area around Ovilla, which of course keeps our engine 2 in service in the city in place of having to run with our medic out there. So, you know, I don't know exactly the dollar amount that you want to put to it, but when you're talking about pretty close to $1 million worth of benefit to the city and 29 years of goodwill, I have a hard time being critical of them, you know, and saying, well, gosh, we've got an increasing budget, which we do, and so, you know, you're just going to have to keep coughing up more money. And they've basically given me evidence over the years that they're going to do the best they can. They're not withholding stuff from us. So that's my history.
So Ovilla still serves the northeastern portion?
Yes, sir, they do. They're contracted. And actually, Ovilla responds throughout the fire district, not just the northeastern portion. So we routinely get Ovilla's help on grass fires on the west side, and certainly their help on structure fires all over the place. The good thing about the monies that the ESD has contributed to them recently, within the last 3 or 4 years, is it's actually allowed the staff over there to be off-duty paid firefighters. In other words, firefighters off-duty from their primary job, working a shift force of pay in Ovilla, and therefore at the station ready to roll a truck instead of waiting for volunteers to show up like it used to be. So it's a much improved system all the way around. And you know, I really have a lot of appreciation in my heart for the guys that are on that board, because they have never backed away from trying to help.
I'm not trying to back away. I'm just trying to make sure that we're being prudent in what we're looking at as far as supporting that, because there were a significant number of runs into that area. And hear me on this, is that I support our support in ESD. I think we should do it. And at the same time, for that support, the citizen inside of Midlothian is $260 per citizen, just in the fire budget alone. Again, I say the county resident is paying $66.33. So it's being subsidized by Midlothian citizens for that out-of-county work, because they couldn't do it without it. The services would simply have to be provided somewhere else. And I think before we move to accept that, council just ought to understand exactly what they're voting into on that. And that's the reason why I bring that up. Are they paying enough? I'm not going to ask them to pay any more. But I think before we go into budget season next year, we need to make sure we're understanding that by not providing services into the county, which again, I'm not saying we should do, but if we didn't, the size of our fire department that would have to service the citizens solely inside of Midlothian would be much smaller to be able to service the number of runs that they have to. So we build buildings, and we hire people, and we pay their benefits, and we buy the fire engines, and we buy all those things so that they can serve those. And yes, the citizens get benefit, but so do the county residents. They're paying much less per share for that service.
You know, one of the things we studied a few years back, at Don's desire, was a funding model to determine what the fair contribution of the ESD really would be, budget-wise to the city. And we tried two different models, rather complex in one regard and rather simple in the other. We finally settled on the simple model, and basically that model said, what percentage of runs, of the total runs of the Midlothian Fire Department, what percentage of those are in the ESD? At the time we were doing that, we were running about 25 or 26% of our runs in the ESD. And they could not fund 25 or 26% of our fire budget. They were not able to, even if they wanted to. I don't think they could have done it on their tax base. Over the last few years, both because the city seems to be growing faster and because we have annexed some fairly good chunks, the percentage of runs of the fire department into the ESD is now running about between 18 and 19% on the average. And you guys see that in your monthly reports when you look at them every month. So we are running less percentage of runs. And I can't do the math in my head, but 60 over 260, what's that? 60 over 320 for a percent. Want to do that real quick, Don? I'm just guessing. I'm estimating what you're saying there. What percentage is 60 over 320?
That is 18.7%.
Darn close, isn't it?
But Mayor, may I just add some additional information? One thing that the council might want to take into consideration about the $66 per capita of ESD budget versus the $260 per capita of city budget that is applied to fire and EMS is that on the city side, we have industry, retail, and office, and non-residential, and that's contributing a whole lot to our fire and ESD budget. But when you divide it by the population, it kind of, paints a bit of an unfair picture with regard to the parity between those.
About what percent of our budget comes from non-residential?
It's approximately 1/2.
So you take that 1/2 of the 260, bring it down to 130.
Right, and so that's still quite different from the 66. But the other thing that we need to take into account is the state of Texas does not allow cities, including Midlothian, to have ESDs that have more than 10 cents per 100 tax rate. So there's no way, even if the ESD were to increase their tax rate from 9.5 to 10 cents, there's no way they could ever kind of hit the same numbers that we had. But as the fire chief has said, if you look, there's different ways of comparing, looking at parity, and one of those is what percentage of all of the fire and EMS runs are in the city limits versus the ESD. And when you look at it that way, it's nearly equal. And then if you look at what percentage of the city's fire and EMS budget the ESD is providing, once you include the EMS fees, it's 19%. And then compare that to the number of fire department runs that David and his fire crews make in the ESD, that's 18.77%, rounded up to 19. So there really is parity when you look at it from those perspectives.
Thank you, Chief. I don't have any more questions.
I just had a question about, you said they're trying to build up their reserve. What is that goal?
I think over the next 3 or 4 years, they'd like to build it up to about a 60-day reserve.
And right now, I think
Right now, it's 8 days.
about 8 days.
they may not be able to get there,
I
quite
think,
frankly.
I have to say, looking at the reports that we got, it is kind of glaring that our budget is going higher and higher and higher, and we're at static on how much we're getting back in. So if you take the percentages from '09 down to what it is right now, we're decreasing in percent of help with the budget. So I think that was one of the kind of glaring things that I noticed is they're building up their reserve, and yet here we are sitting here going higher and higher with cost and getting less money into our coffers to help with that.
Well, they actually, one of the things that I'm appreciative of is, you know, our last annexation in Oak Hollow removed 10 million.
Yeah, between 7 and 9 probably million.
Moved quite a few $1 million worth of taxable value for them. And to this point, they are not inclined to reduce their contribution from what it has been. So in essence, if you wanted to look at it from a relative standpoint, they're actually giving us more money on the,
Their taxable value in the county went up.
well, I'm just telling you, we took quite a bit from them, and I suspect we're going to take a whole bunch more from them in the near future.
There is obviously building going on out into.
Oh, yes, yes, you're right.
Which puts back some of that back. That was only my question.
The only question I had, so I'll make sure I'm understanding you correctly, and I believe I am, because I've dealt with these, as far as the thought process for the ESD contracts and so forth back. They are not under an obligation to use us through the state, or are they through these grant funding processes to use a local fire safety health services in that county, or can they at any time decide to go out for bid for EMT services and so forth outside of our group, so to speak?
The legal requirement on the ESD, because they're taxing those residents for fire and EMS protection, is to provide fire and EMS protection, and they're not constrained in doing it any way they see fit to do it. They can contract with current fire departments like they do with us in Ovilla. They could form their own fire department and operate it themselves, pay their own employees and build their own fire stations. Obviously, probably not with what they have in terms of revenue could they have a very substantial fire department. I would also tell you that if you took $1 million away from us, we couldn't have quite the fire department we have either. And, you know, one thing, TJ, that I would want to say is that none of the fire departments in Ellis County, in fact, none of the fire departments that I'm aware of in the state of Texas, with the possible exception of Houston, can handle all their own problems without outside help. And so that's why we have what we call mutual aid agreements or automatic aid agreements with the fire department. So let's assume for just a minute that the city and the ESD parted the ways somehow or another. And the ESD went out with their tax money and they got them what they could in terms of the fire department, the EMS department. It's highly likely that we would be responding out there to help them on structure fires or really bad wrecks where they run out of resources. Very likely that we would go ahead and respond out there to help them, just like we would ask that they respond in to help us. Only now we wouldn't be getting $1 million to do it. And so could we do with less firemen if we didn't run outside there? You might think so, you know, I mean, just, no, you can't. And I'll tell you why you can't. Because you need to man the apparatus with a certain minimum number of people to answer one call a year. You know, I mean, unless you want to go back to the volunteer days. I don't think any of us want to do that. So you have a certain fixed cost in providing fire and EMS protection. And especially if you want to do a system like we have, which is kind of the best in the whole area. Now, that's a decision that the council makes every year. What level of service do we want to provide? Do you want to cut it back? Do you want to tell your citizens, well, we just don't feel like we want to spend as much money on fire and EMS this next year? You know, that you have the right to do that. You may come up to a point where you feel like you have to. I don't know. But I don't want to be here when you do that.
I would think that they would, if
Yes, you can. I will tell you right now that you could talk to 2 fire chiefs in the larger cities in Ellis County, and they are crying over the service that they're getting from the provider, which is very much less than what we give.
Any more questions? Do you have a motion?
Make a motion, we approve item 331 as presented.
Second. I have a motion from Councilman Henley for approval, and a second by Councilman Rogers to record the votes. And that's passed 7-2. Thank you. 2014-333, conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed fiscal year 2014-2015 annual operating budgets for the city of Midlothian. Our Assistant City Manager, Finance Director, Mr. Chris Dick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Obviously, tonight is where we give the opportunity for our citizens to weigh in on the budget process. Just real quickly, you will, in your packet, you had a few handouts that were just notating some changes that have been made since the initial presentation on July 22nd, and then a few changes after the August 5th workshop. So you have some changes to the general fund, the utility fund, and the Midlothian Development Authority budget, primarily from the change in the proposed tax rates, which had a dramatic effect on the general fund and the Midlothian Development Authority budget. So, but with that, really, tonight is about the public hearing from the citizens. So, and then be glad to answer any questions from the council.
Does anyone have any questions? I have no one registered to speak or ask any questions on the budget. Is there anyone that would want to speak? Okay, and this is actually a non-action item, so we'll just continue the public hearing until
We'll have the next public hearing on September the 9th, which is also the date of adoption for the budget.
Thank you, Chris. We'll move to 2014-334, conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed 2014-2015 tax rate increase and schedule, and announce the date and time and place of the meeting to adopt that tax rate.
Thank you. Same thing here, this is for the citizens to give input on the proposed tax rate. As you know, the proposal is for a 70.8244% tax rate. We do have the public hearing tonight, and then we would also have a public hearing on September the 2nd, and then the adoption of the tax rate on September the 9th. So we do have the legal notices published, and all we need to do now is have the public hearings. And I'll be glad to answer any questions about the tax rate.
And I have no one registered to speak on that. We do have the second hearing on September 2nd here at 6 o'clock, and then the adoption of the budget will be on Tuesday, September the 9th at 6 o'clock here in the council.
And we continue this public hearing until then.
Yes, and we will continue that hearing until then. We'll move to 2014-335, and we will continue a public hearing to consider and act upon an ordinance amending the City of Midlothian zoning ordinance 2013-24 as amended to rezone 183.8 acres from the current agricultural district to a planned development district for residential, commercial, retail uses, and open spaces, generally located south south of Mount Zion Road and east of FM 663 in the city of Midlothian, Texas, preserving all other portions of the zoning ordinance as amended, and that the public interest, morals, general welfare demand, and zoning change and amendment herein made, and providing an effective date. And our planning director, Mr. Kevin Lesher.
Excuse me, thank you, Mayor and Council, good evening. Sorry about the long caption, but this is a case that's, has a long history to it. And what I want to show you tonight, to give you an update, the applicant has made some changes in as much that they have reduced the amount of acreage that will be subject to this zoning request. And what I have on the slide right now, on the far left, this was the original zoning case that was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission at 2 hearings, and they recommended approval of this. But then, in the time between the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing and your last city council meeting, we received more neighborhood opposition or surrounding opposition from surrounding property owners. And at the last meeting, we reported to you that based on this zoning configuration for the total 183 acres, that we had received enough opposition that would kick in the 20% rule. And that 20% rule applies to the amount of land area within a 200-foot buffer around the zoning case that has protested. And at that time, we told you that it would require a supermajority of the votes, and we only had enough council members here to meet that majority. And so the applicant asked for a table. Now, when the applicant went back to the drawing board, and they went back to their owner, and they deleted approximately 47 acres from this request. So now what you're seeing on the slide on the right, this is the quote request they have before you. It's now 135.9 acres, about 136 acres. And so what I'm telling you now, based on this change, number one, it is competent to proceed to the city council because they have actually decreased the scope and the magnitude of this request. Therefore, it does not need to be, in our opinion, remanded back to Planning and Zoning Commission. And furthermore, let me see the next slide will prove. We're going to go to the next slide. Furthermore, because they have deleted the area to the north, that is where the majority of the opposition was located. Again, to the left, you see the entire 183, the original 183 acres, and you see the 20% of the protested area is surrounded by the red lines here. But when you delete the northern portion, and this would be the portion that would be north of where the future Hawkins Meadow Road would be aligned, we only have about 4% protest now. So, second thing I'm telling you, by the way, is you no longer need a supermajority vote. So, it is competent to proceed, and you don't need a supermajority vote. Any questions on that aspect before I go into the changes in the density and dimensional requirement? Okay, here's what the map looks like now. Now, when in between the original P&Z hearing in council, the applicant did try to respond to some of the concerns from the opposition to the north, and they put most of their 80-foot lots, which are indicated in the red colors and the orange colors here. But those are now being taken out of the mix. So the question is, what's the density like? How many 60s, how many 70s do we have for this configuration on the right side of the request? So here we have, in terms of the overall acreage, as I told you, they deleted approximately 48 acres from it. The commercial, they originally had 7.6 acres of commercial. Now that's been taken out. There is no commercial in the request that they're submitting to you today. Open space, originally they had 12 acres planned. They have 9.2 now. That's a deletion of almost 3 acres. The residential acreage has gone down from 164 to now to 126.7, so that's a deletion of 37.4 acres. And the lot count has gone down from 96, almost 100 lots. It's now at 317 lots, previously 430.